I'm fascinated by Damascus steel. I have lots of it. My wife asked about Damascus rings. The normal way is to make a rod of Damascus and drill out about 90% of it. That's a lot of waste. There must be a better way. There's a video by Steve Culver on YouTube titled How to Make a Damascus Gun Barrel. Well, I guess a gun barrel, if you cut it up, makes a whole bunch of rings. Simple, right? I had a piece of mosaic laying around, and since this was a first try, I figured what the heck. The process is wrapping the Damascus around a mandrel, which keeps the center open and hollow. Time to make some tools. From Steve's video, I copied some tools to try this technique. First, I drilled out from a 1 1/4 inch mild steel a 3/4 inch through hole. From this, I was able to section off different pieces. Here I'm grinding a flat on this 1 1/4 inch piece. This is so I can place a 1/2 inch hole all the way through it and cut that part off, and that'll be part of my wrench assembly. The remainder of that will be my slider that'll be used to try to flatten out the twist that is made around the mandrel. Here I'm drilling the through hole, and these are the components. The mandrel is a 5/8 inch rod, and the slider goes back and forth over that. The other two are 1/2 inch rod, and they're welded through, leaving the hole in the center open so that that'll be placed over the mandrel. That is just a stop block to allow some hold power on the rod when turning it. Here we're heating up the mosaic chunk. This was really a large piece of 16 bar simple mosaic. Here I'm pressing it a little bit too much as I'm getting squeezed out along the sides. Just trying to get into a manageable form at this time. Really had too much material. After I thinned this down a bit, I sectioned it into 2 separate billets. I decided to make a knife with one of them just to see what the pattern would show up, and the other one would be drawn out into a 3/8 inch square rod. It's about 18 inches long. Heated this up quite a bit, placed it into my makeshift vise, trying to hold this thing. This was definitely the wrong way. Tried in reverse, and this actually allowed me to twist it a little bit, but you could see the steel already was cooling off. This became a real problem trying to keep this hot enough to bend around, and took countless heats. Here I finally have it wrapped. It looks absolutely horrible. It's terribly twisted. Here's where the mandrel comes over to try to close up these open areas. Used a lot of borax flux here and banged this. Unfortunately, my camera was out of position, and all you could see was my back as I was pounding the slider on top of the mandrel. A lot of heat, a lot of flux, and the press together started closing up the spaces between the welds. I repeated this step probably 5 times at least or more to try to get these voids that you'll see to close up You can still see the spaces. But eventually it became a bar. I really wasn't expecting anything, and brought it to the lathe and started trimming it down. It wasn't until I removed at least a 1/4 inch of material that I got into what appeared to be a solid bar without any inclusions. Sure, my lathe work is absolutely horrible, and this ring section I should have drilled a through hole and then paired it off, but that was a mistake. I then had to separately drill the hole all the way through. After I sanded the rings that I took off and then put them in some ferric chloride, you can see the patterns. This is the bar that was left after removing, after it was etched. Here's the other billet that I used for the knife. I rough forged this into shape. Then I put it through a press to about a 1/4 inch thick. I took it down with my surface grinder to about 3/16, and here I'm filing the tang to fit the guard. I used elk antler, Damascus, and some bronze for the end of the handle. Here you can see trying to get this gap to fit precisely. I have a mill. It works a lot better. I try to do it by hand here. It works, but it's fairly tedious. Here, instead of just doing a blind tang and trying to rough it out, I find that if I glue veneers together that match the thickness of the tang and then cut out the shape of the tang, everything works better. It slides in perfectly. It leaves a little bit of extra space for the epoxy to adhere. Also gives me a nice accent line down the middle of the blade. And the two handles are all glued together into one piece. Here they're just wrapped with wax paper and then clamped between two pieces of plywood. Here I've cut out the space for the tang with plenty of room for epoxy. I use pins to hold everything together, so in this part the Damascus is attached to the elk horn with the pins and carpet tape while I'm shaping it. This seems to work better, and it's a lot easier to deal with than super glue, but I do use super glue with accelerator at times. The pins also allow a way of pinning it directly to the wood material and the handles so everything won't move. Once it's put in place, it's blocked and it holds. This is an easy way to start shaping the excess material if you just draw the same distance on each corner and grind that off. It puts you much closer to a circular shape. Here I'm just test fitting everything together. You can see I've rounded some of the edges off and checking it now to fit, see how well it fits. And you can see those pins fit exactly into the same place, so I don't have to worry about any movement. The knife is pretty well done at this point. The pattern is certainly different. There's this seam down the back with the veneers. In wrapping up, this technique allows you to place any Damascus pattern on a ring. I've already modified my process to make precise wraps and better welds.